Today in episode 72 of the podcast, we will be reviewing Final Destination Bloodlines, the final 3 episodes of Andor Season 2, and we'll be revisiting Rogue One, a Star Wars story. We'll also be giving you the rundown of the top stories of the week, including Michael J. Fox coming back to acting. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, before we get started with the news, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And as always, please go to we'llbringthepopcorn.com where you can get access to our social media information, our archive episodes, as well as our merch store so you continue to support the show in that way. Thanks again for your continued support.
So to kick the news off this week, we've got word that Michael J. Fox is returning to acting, so he is joining Shrinking Season 3. So we've talked about it a lot. I finally got you to watch the show and everything, and you binge watched it, where you got Season 3 coming up. I have a feeling, and I think everyone has the same feeling, if you watch Season 2, if you know the show, Paul is dealing with Parkinson's, which is the same disease that Michael J. Fox is fighting in real life. So you figure that's got to be some sort of either support group or something where he runs into him, and it's actually going to be both of them dealing with Parkinson's and going like that. And I just thinking of the humor and the dark humor and stuff that they could do with that, and I think it's just going to be fantastic. But to see Michael J. Fox back acting on TV, and they don't have to try to ignore the very real disease that's attacking him, I think it's going to be really great.
It makes so much sense for this to be the type of story that kind of brings him back into it, to kind of, not hide the fact that he's dealing with a very serious disease like Parkinson's is, but this is the perfect way to kind of get him back on screen, back into acting. I was so excited when they announced this because, Michael J. Fox has had so many iconic roles over the years, obviously Marty McFly among his most famous, but it's really cool to see him kind of dive back into the acting world with something like this on a show that is so smart and so brilliantly written and so funny, but has that serious warmth and depth to it.
You can have some gut punches.
Yeah, just an amazingly well-written show, and have him be a part of that cast is something I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can already just hear banter between Harrison Ford and Michael J. Fox of what jokes are going to come with, but I really hope that we get to see a heartfelt thing so he can bring more, like Michael J. Fox can bring more awareness to Parkinson's and how it affects people and stuff, but also give a solid performance and, shining light on what he actually goes through. Like, there's so much I could do, because we did end Season 2 with Harrison Ford giving such a passionate speech to his friends to say everything, like such an emotional moment, and we had a lot of emotional moments at the end there, and there's potential that Season 3 could be the end of Shrinking here. It's kind of same as Ted Lasso and a few others. So we saw Ted Lasso ended with Season 3 for a couple years. Now it's coming back for Season 4. Right. So right now it looks like Season 3 might be the end of Shrinking, but it's a heck of a way to go out and bring Michael J. Fox into the cast.
Just an incredible show, like I said. It's awesome. He's a huge get for that show, and hopefully if it is the end of the line for Shrinking, that it can goes out on a high note that it always feels like it could potentially go out on, and it's one that I would be happy if it didn't stay beyond its welcome here, because it is such such a smart, well-written show that, you don't want it to drag on for too long. Mm-hmm. But this one I feel could be a perfect story arc for 3 seasons, just to kind of wrap everything up. It feels like, there's some healing that's finally starting to happen with everybody here by the end of Season 2, that maybe they go on this healing journey for Season 3 and just kind of, end it on a really positive note. I think it'd be a great way for the show to end, honestly.
Yeah, and you brought Brett Goldstein, who is a writer on the show, is also Roy Kent and wrote on, Ted Lasso. You brought him in as a big emotional storyline in Season 2, and we kind of ended that pretty emotionally as well. So there's going to be a lot of healing and building, as you mentioned, in Season 3 because of his character and what he did and what he was feeling, and he was ready to end it all at the end of Season 2, but that changed. So there's a lot of emotional weight still left to kind of go through, but like you said, you do see a lot of that healing has started. So Season 3 does feel like it could be a proper end to it, but if it went on for a couple more seasons, as long as the writing stayed up to the high quality and it was a story that we really felt needed to be done, it would be great. But yeah, Michael J. Fox, Harrison Ford, potentially being like, this is speculation. We don't know exactly what the storyline's going to be with Michael J. Fox and what he's going to be doing on the show, but that's our speculation, that we think that it has to be something where he's relating to Harrison Ford about his Parkinson journey. In real life, he's been fighting it since 1991.
Right.
So, he's got plenty of experience to be able to talk about it and show. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they worked with him on the storyline and see exactly what they can do and fit him in and how it all works.
Yeah, they've actively been working on shooting the season now, so it's just a matter of time before we really get that season out, and I just can't wait for that show to come back. It's been low-key one of my favorite pleasant surprise TV shows that I've gotten into over the past year, and it's one that I'm excited to see the conclusion of moving forward. Now I want to move this into another news story this week that kind of caught me by surprise and wondered, is it actually necessary? So one of my personal favorite, romantic comedy type films at the end of the 90s was 10 Things I Hate About You. And now we've gotten word that there's going to be 3 more of these types of movies that are going to be made that are coming out over the next, several years. But it caught me by surprise. I was like, does this warrant its own universe? We jokingly say everything gets made into a franchise nowadays, but we got word that they're making 3 more sequels to this, and I just got caught way off guard with this one.
Yeah, of course, this is what introduced just about everybody to Heath Ledger back in the day. That was one of his bigger roles. I believe you had Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that. You had Julia Stiles. The original director is behind these sequels, but it does feel like after so long that this is 1999, and now I feel old saying that's so long ago because that's when my brother graduated high school was back then. Now I'm making him feel old, so take that, John.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so they did say in the very first sequel they're going to pay some sort of tribute to Heath Ledger in it, so it's going to have something in there. So we don't know exactly if Julia Stiles' character is coming back, who all's going to come back. He said, I'd love to work with any of them if I could get them back, but they're called 10 Things I Hate About Dating, 10 Things I Hate About Marriage, and 10 Things I Hate About Kids.
That's a recipe for winning right there.
So it's really interesting to see that they're revisiting after this much time, and they've already got 3 sequels planned. There's even a Broadway show for 10 Things I Hate About You that's being done by Carly Rae Jepsen and Leah Dunham. So for whatever reason, I guess 2025 and beyond is going to be 10 Things I Hate About whatever for the next several years.
Yeah, there's some cute topics that you can kind of dive into and kind of tell a story about, but I don't understand the need necessarily to dive this deep into it. But, hey, more power to them. Hopefully the scripts are good, the movies are good, and, we'll take it. I don't know how to feel about it, honestly, because it just feels like one of those, did we really need it? Is anybody really clamoring for this, more of this type thing? But who knows? And that's not taking anything away from the original, because I love 10 Things I Hate About You. It's a fantastic, romantic comedy that was very quintessential 90s, late 90s, early 2000s type romantic comedy. It's one of the top tier ones of that time, and just surprising that it's taken this long to come back to it. But the fact that we're not only getting a follow-up, we're getting 3 follow-ups is just something that I'm just, like I said, caught me completely off guard, and I don't know why we're diving this deep into it. But hey, if they've got a plan, let's play it out and let's see what happens.
Yes, we really don't get those teen romance type of movies done anymore. Not in the same way that they were in the 90s and early 2000s. So yeah, what exactly now brought this back to coming back around? And it'll be interesting to see how they pay tribute to Heath Ledger. If it's going to be to his character, but of course it's going to be to Heath. But yeah, it's going to be realistic. They can get some of the original cast back, and exactly how they move this forward, or it could be you get a little bit of the original cast back in the first one, and then you move on with the new cast for the next 2, saying someone else's story. But yeah, it's after 26 years or so, did we really need to revisit a cult classic that most people, if you grew up in the 90s and 2000s, or if you're born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s and 2000s, this was one of your favorite films. This was a big film, guy or girl. You really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It's a fun film, but yeah, do we need 3 sequels and a musical? Musical, I could see working
Sure,
okay.
sure. I mean, I've seen musical adaptations of those like several years after they were made, and they work out just fine, and they're good. Like that, that could be a lot of fun. But we'll see what the future of the movies holds, because we got 3 of them coming, so we'll see what happens with them.
And another series that I think a lot of people have questioned if it's needed is a spinoff of The Office. So, of course, the American Office is a spinoff of the British Office. Now we've got yet another spinoff several years later. I mean, The Office has been off for several years, but it's still like a syndicated hit that it's, I think, Comedy Central airs every season like once a week, so it goes through over and over again. I admit I still watch reruns on there and stuff, but we finally got a date that the paper is going to be on Peacock in September. We got our first screenshot from it, which did show Oscar with his own cubicle, his own desk there, so it does look like he's fully integrated, because we weren't sure if that was going to be some sort of cameo or exactly how it was going to work, but he looks like he's a main part of the cast from that picture.
Yeah, it's going to be fun seeing Oscar in this new setting. But yeah, I'm curious to see what the tone of the show is going to be. Is it going to be some of that same kind of cringy type of humor that is kind of the standard for The Office, which for a show like that completely works and makes it so funny and so, iconic that it's been, like you said, this juggernaut of a syndicated series that it's just as popular now as it ever was when it aired. And we'll see if that audience follows it to Peacock. I imagine the initial viewing numbers for that are going to be through the roof of people that, love The Office, that want to come back and, check it out and look for, potential cameos from other cast members. Because they've been kind of hush-hush on other people potentially showing up in it. I know there's been some rumblings that a few of the other Office characters are going to make appearances on it. Maybe not quite a John Krasinski or a Jenna Fisher, maybe, but maybe some of the others that...
Maybe we get a story about Athlete or that
right.
Pam and Jim went off to help do on, and there's a picture of them together or something.
Yeah,
like
some kind of mention.
I would still love if it was the other John, if it was the other Jim instead of John Krasinski.
What other Jim? That was Jim.
Oh, yeah, there's
totally Jim.
Thank you for not seeing Race.
Yeah, but we'll see if that plays a part in anything for it. But yeah, I imagine there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it, and I'm glad that it's coming in September. Something to look forward to for sure. I love The Office as well, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays up to people's expectations for what this new series could be. It's going to be hard to replicate the popularity of it, obviously, and it's rare that follow-ons like that do, but there's potential there for something good, so we'll definitely look forward to giving it a shot when it comes out.
Yes, we have to see, are they trying to recreate a Michael character are they trying to recreate a Jim and Pam? Are they trying to do something new and different? Or is it The Office rebooted in a newspaper field? Like, you've got Oscar who can breach the gap between, but are they really trying to do something new, or is it just going to be a retread? And we don't really know until we find out in September, but I'll be watching at least the first few episodes to see how it does. We know may have to give it the whole first season, because the first season of The Office was very short, but it was okay, and it wasn't until that season 2 that it really took off into the juggernaut that it was, that they really got the stories and got everything set. So I think season 1 was fun, but it was season 2 that really started The Office off to be the mega hit that it was.
For sure, and time will tell on if it has the staying power of the other Office, or if it's going to be another long line of unsuccessful spinoffs that we forget about, or we put on a list of worst spinoffs of all time. You never know. It's the
you got to know the newspaper has to be using Dunder Mifflin paper.
They have to be. They just have to be. And, with the digital age and stuff, there's some fun stories that they could dive into and tell for sure. One of the most anticipated movies, though, moving on, of 2025 coming up is Wicked for Good, the follow-up to the wildly successful Wicked Part 1. You go back and look in our archives and see our review of that. We just absolutely love that film. I'm so excited, and one of my most anticipated movies for sure this year, coming out in November. But to kind of bridge the gap between now and when that comes out is going to be a live musical special that NBC announced. It's going to have Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo in it. I'm so excited for that. It's going to take place before the release of Wicked for Good, but it's also going to feature some music from the movie to kind of get people hyped and excited about the film. But I'm so beyond excited for that, because both of those two incredible vocal talents, and I'm excited to see what they do for that special.
Yeah, that was said on June 4th. They're going to be re-releasing Wicked into theaters with the first trailer for Wicked for Good. So that's your first place that you're going to be able to see the Wicked for Good trailers in front of Wicked being released back in June. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see how that is, exactly what they're doing with this live musical special. If it's just a standard, like they're just going to be performing songs, or are they doing like skits or scenes, like exactly what they're doing. They just announced it's a live musical special. I assume we're going to get a couple of the bigger hits, or at least one of the bigger hits from the second half of Wicked that we'll get in there. But yeah, they got to build on this hype. Like, it was one of the biggest movies of last year. You've got your re-release happening. You've got this live musical special. They're going to make sure that everyone is ready to head into that movie once it releases later this year.
Brilliant marketing on their part. Like, this is an incredible way to showcase the talent of your two main stars. Two incredible vocalists. I mean, Cynthia Erivo's getting more opportunities now for things. I'm excited for that. They just announced that she's doing kind of a one-off residency in London in February of next year, doing a live musical version of Dracula, which is going to be exciting and interesting too. There's also some rumblings that maybe she potentially could be one of the people in talks to play Storm in the MCU. I've heard that rumbling thrown around a little bit.
I haven't watched it yet, but she's in the second season of Poker Face as well.
Absolutely. She's kind of showing up everywhere, and I love it. Phenomenally talented actress and singer. So excited for what could be for Wicked here coming up, and it's going to be really fun to check out that musical special when it drops.
Yeah, for those video game fans, we've kind of been waiting for a long time for Gears of War to be made into something, whether it be a series or a film, and it looks like we're finally getting some movement on that. So David Leitch, who did The Fall Guy, Bullet Train, and Deadpool 2, is going to be directing the live-action Gears of War film for Netflix. We still don't know a cast. We know for years Dave Bautista has been petitioning to become Marcus Phoenix, be the lead character in that film. They even put out a skin of him as Marcus in Gears 5. So the developers know that he wants to do it, but we'll see if he ends up being the main character or not. But, you got a guy who's done some good action films and stuff. It's going to be real interesting. Gears of War needs to be a dark, dramatic, gory, over-the-top, hard R type of film to fit the storyline and what it went through. And we'll see if it's going to be a direct adaptation of the game, or if they're going to make some changes, and if we get the Mad World song in there redone by someone else. Like, there's a lot of iconic stuff behind that first Gears game, that even they're doing a remaster of the game that'll be coming out later this year as well. So that's another way to kind of get people hyped, that you get that, I think Gears 5 is a couple years old now. You get the first one remastered, maybe 6 months to a year before the movie comes out, build a little more interest back up into that franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic gaming series. I can't imagine them trying to cast anyone other than Dave Bautista to play that starring role. He's been lobbying for it forever. He's a perfect fit for it. He's just a phenomenal actor in his own right. He's come such a long way from his days as a pro wrestler, and now he's just kind of really carved this good niche for himself out in Hollywood as well, with, obviously wildly successful films like Guardians of the Galaxy and everything like that. But he's been in some other really good things outside of Marvel that, I think should come to the forefront for him. But getting him in a role like that would be awesome. I'm excited to see what they do with that. The Gears of War games are all fun, iconic games as well, like you said. Just excited to see what they do with the film. What elements from the games are they going to bring into the story? Because it's hard to make a full faithful adaptation, as we come to find out for things. But if you take elements from the game, put it into a story in a way that makes sense, I think they got some magical things that they could do with that for sure.
There's plenty of things being chainsawed in half from the Lancer and everything, but it's going to be interesting to see if he bulks back up for it, because if the Gears game, like, the guys are all ridiculously oversized. You could get Terry Crews to be Coltrane or something fun like that, but they're really big, and Dave has kind of slimmed down, which is good for him, for his health and for everything else, to not have to try to maintain that big body. But that's kind of what Gears is known for, is that big, huge, oversized arms and bodies. Like, they have full metal, big suits, but they have their arms fully out and everything. So it's going to be really interesting. They could work around it by giving them sleeves or something else. But I think a lot of fans are going to be looking for those big, macho, over the top. And I would love to see John DiMaggio get some sort of cameo in there. He was the voice of Marcus. He's also the voice of Bender and so many other things. Like it was a great voice role for him. I'd love to see if he would get some sort of cameo in the Netflix series, even if it's a random guy who gets killed off on the side or something, or another soldier that just meets his doom. But it would be nice to give those voice actors who have voiced those roles for such a long time get some sort of cameo and love in the film.
Sure, get some kind of love and appreciation for the dedication they've had to their roles over the years. But I'm sure no matter what happens, the internet will be calm, supportive, and just up in arms with nothing but positivity about the film. So I'm excited to see the discourse around that. Couldn't possibly be anything going wrong or sideways with that as far as the internet.
The internet is perfect and kind.
Yeah, can't possibly have anything negative to say about it. So time will tell. One of the things that's been kind of in the weeds, waiting to hear an answer on for a long time now, is a follow-up to Batman, the Robert Pattinson Batman, the Matt Reeves universe Batman. And it feels like we finally got a little bit of movement on that. So it seems like by the end of this month, we could finally get the first draft of the script for Batman 2, which has been a long time coming.
Just wild.
It's been forever since, it feels like it's been forever since the movie came out. But, with the success of Penguin, everybody was kind of hoping they'd quickly move on a follow-up to it and have everybody buzzed and talking, but it's been one of those great mysteries. Like, we didn't know where they were with this project. Even Robert Pattinson, the star of the film, was like, it may be time to do Batman Beyond by the time I'm old enough to play Bruce Wayne again, by the time they get this film done. But it does seem like we have some positive direction now, finally.
It's just crazy that this is the first draft being turned in. Yeah. Like, Matt Reeves has been sending in pages for the last 6 to 8 months to Warner Brothers to go over, but he has not provided them with a full script yet. So, like I said, we've been hearing about it it was known when they did the Batman that they would be following it back up with a sequel. Yeah. And for the first draft to be 3 years later, 4 years later after that film is kind of crazy that we're just now good. So this isn't even a final. This is the first draft, and it was supposed to film already. Yeah. It was supposed to film like in March this year, and then it got delayed, and it got delayed again. Robert Pattinson's now doing Dune and The Odyssey and everything else, so it's looking like late 2025, early 2026. But if they don't get a script finished here, like, that's going to be pushed later and later, so we may not see this until 2027, 2028, 2029 because of... I'm glad he's taking his time and getting the story right and not rushing it out, but this is... crazy how long it's been taking just to get the first draft out.
It kind of reminds me of the time gap, and this is going to kind of jump back about 20 years ago or so, which is insane to think about just because of how iconic the films are. But to the previous Batman trilogy, like, you had Christopher Nolan's Batman, where you had, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were relatively close in time as far as when they came out between the two. And then you had that 6-year gap between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, where you kind of had to play into Bruce being older, Bruce being a recluse for such a long time that, he had physical limitations, and they kind of played it into a very real, type story that could have been kind of an art imitating life kind of thing. And you wonder where they're going to take that with Robert Pattinson being such a large gap in time between these two. Like, you do fortunately get a younger version of Bruce Wayne in, this Batman movie, but he's going to be very much a mature, like, how far into being Batman now is he going to be with this follow-up? So it's going to be interesting to see where the script takes it and moves it forward, because, these actors are 6 years older than they were when they made these movies. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, what kind of story they're going to tell. I'm glad that we're finally getting some kind of positive movement on this, because it feels like we've been in the dark for a while, but it seems like he's at least been working on it. So I'm glad that it's moving a little further, even if it's still a ways away from them even starting to be done and ready to shoot a film at this point.
And with The Final Reckoning coming out next week, I've been revisiting the Mission Impossible movies, and those had some large gaps that I didn't realize. Like, there was 6-7 years between some of those films, like 4, 5, 6 years. Some pretty large gaps that I didn't like. It felt like those have just been coming out every 2 to 3 years max, but they took, it started in 1996. The 8th film was about to come out here in 2025, so there's been quite a gap in between to get it that far. But yeah, just when I think about the Batman taking so long, yeah, but there is some stuff. Look at how long it's been since Endgame to where we're getting Avengers Doomsday. It's been quite a few years now to get that done. And you're going to have even Ironheart that we're finally getting in June. We got the first trailer for. That was done back in COVID. and we're just now getting it 5 years later.
Yeah, it's insane to see some of the gaps of time that some of these things have between when they're coming out and when they're following up on it. It's insane. Like it's a lot, but hopefully it's worth the wait. That's what I'll say.
So our last news story this week, we're going to talk about the Hunger Games, Sunrise of the Reaping. So this is another prequel that's telling of Hamish's time in the Hunger Games. And we got a lot of casting that came out. So it's kind of funny, and everybody was reporting on it the same way, that Ralph Fiennes has joined the cast as President Snow. So now we have him as President Snow and Voldemort. So he's played two big villains in book lore and history. Like, those are two pretty big popular. I mean, Harry Potter much popular than the Hunger Games, but the Hunger Games is a very popular series. Right, yeah. And so he gets to play the villain in both. Of course, we lost Donald Sutherland a few years ago and stuff, so they've got to figure out how to keep, Snow. We had a much younger Snow in the first prequel, so now we're getting into the more middle-aged Snow. I'm guessing that we're going with Hamish and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he does as President Snow in there. But we also got, like, Maya Hawke has joined the cast as well. She's going to be Wiress, so it's another character that we know from the original Hunger Games. We also got Lily Taylor as Mags, Ben Wang from Karate Kid Legends and The Long Walk. He's joining as Wyatt, so we've got quite a lot of cast being filled out for this film.
Yeah, good to get Maya Hawke, who's, coming off of, it's going to be a very successful finish for, Stranger Things when it finally comes out. For the love of God, Netflix, give us that show.
That's another one. It started 8-9 years ago, and now we're getting the 5th and final season.
I love it though. I'm so ready for that to come out. That's a side note, but yeah, this is exciting. We get another Hunger Games story. Haymitch is obviously one of the iconic characters from the trilogy that everybody loved, played brilliantly by Woody Harrelson, and now we're getting kind of a dive into his backstory because, as you know from the games, he was a winner of the Hunger Games from District 12, and just a very popular character here, so you kind of get to dive into his story a little bit. There's going to be some fun stuff that you can do with that, but pretty solid casting as far as I could tell with that. Ray Fiennes is a phenomenal actor too, to get him on board with that. Just got to avoid President Snow giving the Avada Kedavra, thing, and the internet's going to have all kinds of fun. I'm assuming they're already well at work at making things.
They'll be photoshopping him with no nose and everything.
Oh, for sure. Like, you have to at this point. It's just what the internet does. It's undefeated, but I'm sure they're going to have a great time and be fun and supportive with that as well. Just excited to see what they put together for that film, because that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. New Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. It was a fun movie overall. Like, it didn't have the same impact that the original Hunger Games had, but it still had a heft and a weight to it. The games could have been maybe a little bit better than they were in there, because there's more about the drama outside of the games more than the games themselves with that. But it's really going to be interesting to see how Hamish is. Like, I've got both the books. I haven't had a chance to read either of these prequels yet, so I really want to dive in and compare the book to, like, Sunrise of the Reaping and Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, compare them both to the movie just to see how different they are from the books. But I have the whole series. I've read the original Hunger Games books. I just haven't got around to reading these prequels, but I'm looking forward to it. I've enjoyed what they've done with the Hunger Games. It's been a fun series to watch. Of course, we had a local from Union here who was part of the Hunger Games. Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this prequel ends up. Like, they fast-tracked it. They announced the movie before the book was even out. Yeah. And moving it, like, quick into production and everything else. Like, they were like, you got it done? All right, let's go.
Yeah, they were ready. They're ready and primed and ready to put this film together and get it out there. So now I want to move us into our film review of the week, which is Final Destination Bloodlines. We finally got a chance to check this out. This is the latest installment of the very popular horror franchise, the Final Destination films. These are all about finding creative ways for people to die. In this film, we start off with, kind of what looks to be a flashback into, like, an old 50s kind of restaurant-y, flashback kind of vision here, where you have a young girl and her boyfriend who proposes to her at this restaurant, takes her on this fancy date into this brand new restaurant. And if you know anything about Final Destination, it's all about just the most absurd of circumstances that could creatively lead to ways of catastrophic things happening to people, and just all about finding creative ways to die. But you get this incredible opening sequence, but then you flash forward in time, and it's all this dream from a young girl named Stephanie, who is having this recurring nightmare that's kind of causing her to suffer in school, bright, intelligent girl, but these nightmares are causing her to potentially flunk out of school. So she goes home and starts looking for answers of who this person that she's seeing in her dreams are, and it kind of lets the movie jump off from there.
It's about her grandma Iris said. It's a premonition that she's had here about what's going on. She doesn't know what's true and what's not, and we don't really know that in the beginning until we get into the story to see exactly what that opening, and that opening was crazy. Like, it's every death in Final Destination is like a Rune Goldberg machine, because it's like, well, this penny gets stuck in a fan, that sets this off, and this knocks over a drink, that knocks over this, that obliterates somebody's face and causes a cave-in, and everything explodes and everyone dies. Like, it's ridiculous. That's what you go into these films for, is the ridiculous, over the top. How creative can they get with the deaths? Like, some are done much better than others. Like, some of them are kind of like, especially like in the tattoo parlor, was a little odd and weird. Well, I'm not going to go too spoiler on what happened there, but that was kind of okay. Then they got a proper one later on, but yeah, it was wild and crazy. Like, it has a solid enough story for a horror film. Like, it's the story is there to just set up the deaths. Yeah. That's what it's there for, because we find out, Stephanie finally reaches out to her grandma, who tells her all this stuff, gives her a book explaining everything to her of how she's cheated death for the last 20, 30 years, or even more than that. I guess she's been hiding out for 20, 30 years, but it was before her life before that. But it was fun. It had some ridiculous, over-the-top deaths, which you expect. That's what you want. You've got a lot of kind of throwbacks to previous entries, because this one is kind of, could be the last one, could not be the last one. I think it all really depends on how well it does. They're kind of talked about that it could be the last one, but it's been quite a few years since we got, I believe this is the 6th in the series before we got the 5th one and stuff. But they definitely did some really over-the-top crazy death scenes in here. Like, some of them were way more graphic than I was expecting. Especially there's a garbage truck and some other things that was just, oh, okay, it doesn't cut away, it doesn't do anything. Like, you're seeing the explosion happen of someone dying very gruesomely.
Yeah, it's very cartoonish in a lot of ways, but very graphic too. And like we say fun, and fun's kind of a tongue-in-cheek form, but the creativity is fun. Like, it's very much a violent, graphic kind of film that deals with a ton of death, almost to the point where it kind of desensitizes you to it a little bit. And I think that's kind of what they're going for with these films, but still leaving open very real and very fear-inducing possibilities of how you could potentially die in some of these scenes. Like, I remember us walking out of it, and I don't want to spoil the scene for anybody, but I was very much walking out of I'm never going to get an MRI again in my life. But, with the
we're also walking out with Shout.
Right. Yeah. And you want to, the old song Shout has been ingrained in my brain.
And that's why we say fun, because they use, people are dying and they're playing Shout.
Yeah, they try to add a little bit of levity to it to kind of take the edge off of it, which I appreciate. But yeah, just a ton of creative different ways that they kill people in this. And it does kind of lead you to believe that it could potentially be the final version of it, because it feels like everything kind of gets buttoned up at the end. But you go back to kind of just some of the cartoonish, over-the-top ways they use blood in this, like, very obviously thick is the word I would use to describe a lot of the blood. It just felt like a lot of thick blood.
Especially
like
one
crazy.
that went over Stephanie's face was just like...
Yeah, just very intense and very like...
Carrie.
Yeah, very very over the top. It almost looked like somebody just threw a bucket of red paint on her.
And now here's a 5-gallon bucket of blood.
Right, it was just insane, but nevertheless, like, it's a fun ride you go on with these deaths and them trying to figure out why it's happening, and the lore behind it. It's a fun journey. It was a fun story. Like, it took you on this ride. It's very, very much not for kids, and I was stunned at the amount of kids that were in the theater for this with us. Like, why would you take your kids to something like this?
Yeah, like, it's always been a humorous type of horror series, but it's very graphic in its violence. And we saw kids, they had to be under 10 years old. They had to be 8 or 9 that we saw going in there.
Yeah, which is insane to me.
I mean, that's you can do what you want with your own kids, but that's just crazy.
Not my place to say.
To be bringing kids into something that's that graphically violent.
We watched it, and you and I were just sitting there like, ugh, like what the heck? Like, at some of the stuff in in the movie. But yeah, man, it's I've seen all of these Final Destination films. I would rank it right up there with the best of them that they've had so far. It's very smart, very creative. Story's just good enough to kind of keep things flowing along in a way that makes sense. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's one of the better ones that they've had.
I'd put it up there too with some of the better ones that they've done. I think what it was about the third one is probably the best one still, but this is right around it.
The first and the third, you could make that argument, were probably the two best, and I put it on par with both of those. Like it's still a really good, really solid horror film.
Because the story's serviceable. You don't go into these exactly for a deep story. It's all about, all right, we found out that death has been cheated. Well, you can't cheat death. How is death getting its revenge? And that's basically the plot of all of them. But it's the inventive, new, creative ways that they do with the deaths. Even when they revisit some of the old ways of deaths, they do it in such an over-the-top, comical type of, all right, you're waiting for it. You know what's going to happen. Oh, wait. Nothing happened. Oh, okay. Here's a revisit to a classic. Like it gets you laughing because of that. Yeah, people are dying graphically, but they do it in a good, humorous way that it does give that levity. Like, yeah, people are dying horribly. Oh, let's play a catchy, fun song or do it in a silly way, especially like towards the end when they're talking. Somebody's like, yeah, but did you really? But did she really? But yeah, did it really? And then just the chaos chain happens, and it's like, okay, oh, that's how we're going to end it, is doing it that way. Like it was fun. It's you go into these for that fun, over the top horror death. You're going for the absurdity, and it gives you plenty of absurd deaths. It gives you a few twists in there, but nothing like. And if you try to pick the story apart, you're going to find plenty of problems. Like if I was going to pick anything apart, it was probably going to be Iris's cabin. Like she's hiding out in this cabin to cheat death. She doesn't go outside. But she's basically built herself a death trap.
Yeah.
So how is she hiding from death within a death trap?
It's the genius of the thought behind it, right? Like it's silly and absurd and over the top, and I just got a lot of fun out of watching this. Like it does in a way a good job of kind of desensitizing you to death. Like they don't use death in the it's graphic and horrific, but not in a like scare the living crap out of you kind of death that a lot of other horror films try to do and try to bring that dread on. It's just more of a silly, absurd death. While it's horrible, it's done in a way with levity that I think works for this type of franchise.
It even gets you cheering for a death from
the original. God, yes.
The original kind of opening. There's a death that happens, and then you're like, yes, you deserve that to happen.
Satisfying.
Even though it's for someone that most of the time, those type of characters are safe in horror movies. Yeah. Not in this one, because you're a little jerk and you deserved it.
Very, very graphic, but it elicited a cheer in the theater, which made me laugh just hysterically for a few minutes. But it was like, yeah, you got what's coming to you, you little jerk. But it's a ton of fun, man. I just got a lot of enjoyment out of this. This is one that you don't need to take too seriously, but you can kind of just go and have a good time. It's very creative the way they build a lot of the death into this movie, that it's like, okay, I never would have thought of this, that, and this. I love kind of its own meta take on itself, especially with the one specific death with the garbage truck, where it was like, oh, like, how are you seeing this? Oh, it could have been done because of this, led to this, led to this, led to this, led to this. And you're like, come on, man, there's no way that it could possibly do that. And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, 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 done. And it's just like, oh,
okay,
so funny.
She called her shot.
Yeah, meta, very meta of itself, which I appreciate, like when it's done right. And in that case, it was very much done right.
And do have to bring up, this is one of Tony Todd's final performances. He was in the first two, along with the fifth one. So he's been part of the franchise for a little while now. And you could definitely see that he had been battling his cancer and everything for there. And there's a nice touching moment that it was the character kind of saying goodbye, but that was Tony saying goodbye. Like you could see the emotion and the heart and everything in his face, that he was basically saying goodbye to everybody in this movie, like in real life. Like he was saying goodbye.
And I believe it was his last credited role. It was heavy.
Like there's a few more that I found on his IMDb page that I guess still haven't come out. IMDb page that haven't come out yet. So, but I don't know if it was the last one he filmed. Yeah. Because everything, he could have filmed this one last, but still have like 10 movies coming out that were done a long time ago. But you could definitely see that he was sick, that he was close to the end there, and it was a really touching kind of goodbye that he got to give to the character. But like I said, it was a goodbye to us, to the fans, to to everybody who enjoyed watching him over the years in Candyman and everything, all the horror that he's done, plus the voiceover work and everything else. Like, it was a nice little kind of touching goodbye in the middle of this crazy over the top. Because I mean, he's saying goodbye, and you've got a cadaver in the back that's completely ripped open and everything else. So it's that again, like you've got a kind of a touching moment, but then also, we're in a crazy over the top horror film.
But you get a little bit of resolution as to who he's been for this story the entire time too, which is a cool nod and ode to Tony Todd, obviously. And it was a really nice send off and kind of a heartfelt moment. You just kind of feel, the energy shift a little bit when he shows up in the film, and it's just like, oh man, we know this is it for him. Like, this is kind of his goodbye. And from what I understand, he got to write that speech. Like, that wasn't prepared for him for the movie. Like, he got to write that and say that himself.
It felt something personal. It felt like it was from Tony and not from JB.
Right. It was really cool to get that moment from him, and it was kind of a take you out of the movie, but kind of kept you in the movie kind of thing, because it tied it together through the film, but it was kind of a wink and a nod to the audience too. Like, hey, like, I know I'm coming up on the end of my life, and I kind of want to send this message out to people. It was really cool. It was worth it to like see that scene, and I like this. Hopefully, people will clip that and let it be its own scene and kind of let that live on forever in the internet. But it was a really cool moment for him that I'm glad they got to put in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, you definitely tell that he's much more frail and smaller than he normally is and stuff. And I think all of us were sitting in the theaters watching it like, oh man, yeah, like he's gone. What are they gonna do here? And it was a nice fitting into his character, but also him, like, to get that goodbye. That got me a little bit, that he got to say a goodbye to everybody, because we do have the ballerina coming up where we have another actor who passed away that we feel like this is the last time we're seeing him. We keep getting a few more roles. I'm curious if we get something similar in the ballerina, but I don't think he really knew what was going on with him. So it's when those who know they're passing kind of get that moment in a film to kind of say their goodbyes. It's a touching moment that you didn't really expect to happen, even though you know that he had passed. You didn't expect Final Destination to give you a touching moment like that.
Right, and it was cool that they incorporated in the overall story that we got here. But, in the end, Final Destination Bloodlines is a lot of fun. It's got the violence that you're looking for. It's got all the violence that you've come to expect from Final Destination over the years, and it mixes in the levity that kind of cuts through a lot of the seriousness of it to kind of take you on this really fun ride that finds creative ways to kill off characters, and just some of the most absurd, but in a lot of ways very practical reasons possible, just kind of dialed up to 11, which is kind of a calling card for this franchise overall. Me personally, I would put it up there with the best of the Final Destination series. I'm going to give this score about a 7.5. Like, I got a lot of enjoyment out of this film. It's not a perfect story by any means, but the plot does enough to kind of keep the story moving along. I really enjoyed the creative ways they incorporate death into this film, and it was just a really fun ride for the, about 2 hours that this film is, and it's well worth going to see if you're a fan of this franchise.
I agree with everything you said. I was going to give it around a 7, because that's based off of pure entertainment. It was just something, even though it's a graphically horrific death film,
sure,
you can have a lot of fun with it, which is still odd to say, even though we know we've had a ton of these horror films that are that way, but it's just weird to say you had a ton of fun with something that's so graphically violent. And it also gives kind of a great, as we mentioned, tribute to Tony Todd, and allowing him to say a goodbye to everybody from his character to himself. But yeah, it had some great practical effects. It had some wild deaths, but it was really entertaining. So it gets a solid 7 out of 10. I mean, it's not going to compare to some others that might be 7 stuff too. This is based off of being a horror film that is just purely entertaining, but I had a fun ride with it.
Yeah, it was Really worth the investment. If you love the Final Destination films, you're gonna love this one as well.
I wouldn't see why you wouldn't enjoy this one.
Like this one was just we keep saying fun, but it's a fun ride. Like, this isn't real death, people. Like, this is just death incorporated into a movie. But if you're a fan of these, you'll love this one. Like I said, it put it right up there with all of the others. It's a lot of fun. Go see it in theaters. This one is well worth it. You get some winks and nods to previous films as well. They do incorporate a log truck at some point in this that kind of made us laugh, but one worth going to see for sure if you are a fan of this franchise or the horror genre in general. One definitely worth adding to your rotation to check out for sure.
Yes, Final Destination Bloodlines is in theaters now. Go check it out and come to our comments, come to our Discord, and let us know what you thought of it. We think you're going to have a fun time. If you enjoyed pretty much any of the other Final Destination films, you're going to enjoy this one.
Yeah, it's right up there with any of the other ones that have come out, and probably right on top with the best one in the franchise.
And now the time has come for the end of Andor. We've got the final 3 episodes of season 2. Again, this is going to be just like the last few heavy spoilers. We're talking about all of it. We've got the final 3. We know how it ties into Rogue One now. But, I mean, 7, 8, and 9 is still my favorite 3 of this series overall from season 2. It was fantastic. But these last 3 were really good as well. So we start off with Luthen and Clea's story. So that's basically the entirety of episode 10 is about them, about how they came to be together, how they kind of started the rebellion, how they started everything. We got to look at Naboo, which we haven't really seen in anything since then, through their eyes and stuff. And it was a really touching story because we get that the Empire is closing in on them. They figured out who Luthen is and what he's been running, and they have to shut things down. But we also get the reveal to Luthen that they're building a Death Star. We finally know everything that's going on. All of the kyber crystals that have been collected, all the materials, all the stuff they've been doing has been about this brand new planet destroying weapon called the Death Star. And we still get some darkness from Luthen in it as well before the end, but we get a really emotional story that we get a bunch of flashbacks of how, Clea and Luthen met, and how, kind of how war had affected Luthen and Clea both, and how their journey went together, that she ended up becoming like a daughter to him and everything. And it was a really touching episode.
Yeah, because in some of the flashbacks they have, like, them going on their journey of trying to start this rebellion and just kind of starting to try to survive on their own, and how the creative ways they have to go about doing it. And they know they need, money, and they need, things to kind of get stuff going. And you see this really, it's a cute interaction in the first place that they go, where he's trying to sell this artifact to get some money, and he's trying to kind of haggle the price up a little bit to kind of, not rip off the person, but still try to get a good amount of money for it. And they're not budging, but Clea jumps in, and she's a young girl at this point, to try to talk to him. And she's like, "Oh, is this your daughter?" And she kind of looks back at him, looks back and goes, "Yes." And, it was a really funny, just a cute little aside for there. It was like, "So I'm your daughter, huh? And you're my daughter, huh?" And he's like, "We'll be who we need to be." It's just like, kind
you're
of thing.
Clea now, I'm Luthen now, let's go.
Right, and that's kind of the genesis of their relationship, really, and just him kind of helping raise her to kind of see why the rebellion is as important as it is, because she witnesses some very gruesome acts by the Empire and
executions.
And it just kind of reinforces that need for the rebellion to exist, and her reconciling that, and growing up, seeing all these awful things happening, just kind of help really radicalize her, and have her in that mindset of doing whatever is necessary to make sure the rebellion is successful. And it was a really powerful episode to kind of see how they got to this point, because you do have this episode where Dedra shows up to Luthen's antique shop, and Luthen's still trying to, wrap things up so he can get away to be with the rebellion here, leading off of the episode 9 fallout and everything that happened by the end of it. And you get a kind of face off between Dedra and Luthen, where Dedra's kind of cornering him in his own antique shop, like, "I know who you are. I know who you really are. Like, I know what you're really about." And, you get Luthen basically, like, having his own out of, stabbing himself, like, "I'm going to die for the cause." Like, it's a very intense moment. And, luckily for the Empire, I guess, they have the building surrounded and kind of attend to him where they can potentially save him, but he winds up in this very heavily secured hospital. But it was a really heavy and intense moment where you're like, oh man, like now you kind of start to see why some of these characters don't make it into Rogue One, and it kind of takes off the story from there, where it's just you just get all kinds of fallout to set things up for where we know we're going to wind up with Rogue One.
Yeah, talking about some of the flashbacks, I mentioned that we get to see a flashback on Naboo where Luthen and Clea are sitting at a table and they see a military convoy on a bridge, and Clea's like, why aren't we doing something? Why aren't we destroying them? Why aren't we attacking them? And Luthen's giving her a lesson on patience and observation and knowing what's going on and what to do and when to move and when not to move. Like, he's training her, he's setting her up and stuff. And we finally see the explosion and she's like, oh, and Luthen's like, yep, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you do see that even though he's training her for rebellion and death and killing and everything else, that he's still got that kind of father, like, we got to do things right. We got to do it strategically, and he's setting that up in her. And I got to give it up for Elizabeth, who played Clea. This was her first acting job. She finished drama school and immediately got Andor, and her role was actually supposed to be smaller. Yeah. And after she did her performances, they realized how good she was, so they expanded the role, and it was perfect because we got a really dramatic scenes from Clea here. She's having those flashbacks and she's upset because, Luthen is hurt and dying, and she knows what kind of has to happen, that she has to see her dad die. Like, he can't be captured. He cannot be held by the Empire. He knows too much. He's too important for them to do stuff. So she sets out on her own to attack the hospital, and she, really cool, breaks in and stealing scrubs and everything, and she's hiding from cameras, and she's making her way through, and even taking an old grandma alien in a wheelchair through, and kind of a little bit of levity because the grandma's like, huh? Like the whole time. Like, but it was that little bit of levity because you knew what was coming up, and Clea takes out a few, she bombs the parking garage, and you get the Empire going away. But we also get Dedra gets arrested because everything that she did was not by the Empire. It was her own doing. She went behind the backs of everybody to do the raid on Luthen and to bring him to the hospital. So she ends up getting arrested in this, which sets off kind of the end of her character, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But we've always wondered exactly what Dedra's motivations and everything were, and we saw with Cyril and everything with what happened on Gorman that she's kind of all in on the Empire now. He had some goodness to him that he kind of got to show towards the end and how he felt, but Dedra is just one of those full, like, she's an Empire girl that's not going to be saved. She's going to do whatever needs to be done because that's how she feels. And there's some great scenes between her and Krennic and everything else where she's being interrogated and all that. But the scenes in the hospital with Clea trying to get to Luthen, and then when she finally gets to Luthen, was just such a heartbreaking scene.
Yeah, because, he can't, like, he's in too deep. Like, you can't have him potentially being, what we know is going to happen, where they kind of torture for information and kind of get everything they can out of him to give up the plans about everything that's going on with the Rebel Alliance. So we get the unfortunate, end of Luthen here by the end of episode 10, and kind of leads us into episode 11, where we, jump in with everybody here. Everybody's moving full forward, with the fallout of everything. You have Dedra, the fallout with Dedra, and what's going on with her. You get to jump into Cassian. You get to jump into like everything that's going on here, and it's really just kind of a breakneck pace to the end of this series from here on out, where they're doing everything they can to line up with what's going to happen in Rogue One, and you really get a start to that resolution in these last two episodes.
Yeah, 11 was a little bit, I'm going to say fun, even though it was dark, because we get Alan Tudyk back as K2SO, and he's got some great lines that even when we're going to talk about, because we did revisit Rogue One and stuff, like, you forget just how funny K2SO was in the film, and you get some more lines in here that was just, like, really good. He's counting down how many orders they've disobeyed and stuff. And he's like, we shouldn't be doing that, because you get a scene like where they're playing the domino type of game, and he's like just ribbing on him. Like it's really fun to see that kind of lightheartedness out of a killer robot that we've seen do some really dark stuff. We know that Tony Gilroy talked about there was actually a horror episode with K2SO that they had to cut because it didn't really fit and stuff, but it was going to be something really dark with that bot, and we get that levity from Alan Tudyk. That's kind of needed because it's a very dark, Clay has escaped the hospital, the Empire's looking for who did it. She goes back to the safe house that's kind of already been gutted and burned, and she's putting together a radio. She's sending out a Morse code type of signal to finally get someone to come help her. And Cassian, Wilmon's the one who receives that. They're trying to figure out this is a stress call, like we need to go. But we have, the senators. We have Mon Mothma, who's now fully Mon Mothma. We got the haircut. We got the outfit. We've got her back looking as she does in Rogue One, which I cannot give enough. She didn't have as much to do in these last few episodes, but Genevieve O'Reilly was just unbelievable as Mon Mothma from all of her appearances before, because she voiced the character, I believe, was in Rebels. She had a small role in, Revenge of the Sith, and then Rogue One, and now what she did with Mon Mothma and her arc through Andor here, like, utterly fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing. And you get, now you start dealing with the political nature of the rebellion, right? So they have this structure in place where they're very militant, very strict, very strategic on how they operate. And, you get this distress signal from, Kleia on Coruscant that they have to go and save her. Like, they have to go and get her off of this planet. So Cassian more or less just decides to obey a direct order from, his superiors in the rebellion, and he goes off on this mission unauthorized to, go help save Kleia, because he thinks that this, in his mind, this is a signal coming from Luthen. So this is a signal that he comes from. He still doesn't know that it's not, Luthen sending this signal. So he thinks he's going to, go save this person who is crucial to the rebellion, despite the differences that they've had. They've had differences of opinions this entire time. And, ultimately, Cassian is on Luthen's side, no matter how much they may butt heads. So he thinks he's going to save his friend. Unbeknownst to him, it's Kleia, but at the same time, he's on a breakout mission to go, on this rescue. And you get that shine on K2SO here because, Cassian's all gung-ho about going and getting it, but he's not as prepared as he thinks he is for what's awaiting him there to kind of, get to where he needs to get to, throw the Empire off just enough, the ISB that's chasing after him, to pull this rescue mission off. So there's some fun little spy, like throwing off signals into other buildings and kind of leading them on a wild goose chase while they're trying to get to Kleia. And you finally get, them reuniting here at the safe house at this level. And, there's a really heartfelt, like, back and forth with Kleia and Cassian, where Cassian does discover that Luthen's gone and, the impact that it starts to have on him. And, they have this conversation. Now they're planning the escape, and it ends episode 11 with them finally finding the right level in the building.
The Empire's closing in on them.
And they're closing in on them in this place, and it just leads into a really fun last episode of the show.
I really like the scenes between Kleia and Cassian here because it's been another year. This was another year time jump, and as we left with the last time Kleia and Cassian were together, it was to get Mon Mothma out, and she called him out. Like, we all have been fighting for so long, just like you have. We've given everything to it, and you just want to hide and get away. And it's a year later now that this is the first time they've seen each other in years. She's like, it had to be you, didn't it?
Yeah.
And like she's upset. She just lost basically her dad.
Yeah.
And the guy who's been running the rebellion and got it all started, and she's upset, and she's kind of, you can see it in her face and her eyes and everything with Cassian, and Cassian's trying to kind of talk to her and defend everything that's he's had to do, that he's still here, he's still fighting and everything, and like, I'm on your side, I'm here to rescue you, just like Luke Skywalker to Leia, I'm here to rescue you. Right. But it was really interesting, kind of this setup. This was definitely a big setup episode. It's a setup how we get the rebellion to fully pop off, because we see the Empire has word of rebellions popping up everywhere, that everyone's fighting against them. They feel like, oh, we were so close to peace and everything, and the rebellions have to keep fighting against us, and it really sets up for a final episode that has a lot of weight and has a lot of drama to it. So, we pick up with that Empire, and episode 12 is closing in, and we get K2SO, who's been told to stay in the ship like he usually does. And it's a good thing he doesn't ever listen, because he goes and he takes out the pilot of the Empire ship, who's kind of destroys the radio for all the others, is left in open comm, so no one can really talk. And we get a little bit of Melshi. They're ready to leave, so they go down the hallway, and Melshi comes out, and the Empire's just looking at him, don't move. Kind of comedic that he's like, what do I do here? Okay, let me run back. But we know nothing too bad was going to happen, because Cassian has to do Rogue One still. So, but we get a concussion grenade goes off, and it knocks Clea out, and Melshi's the only one who's really fighting back. And then you get Cassian, who finally gets his wits about him, and he's covering her up, and you think that the Empire is going to get the drop on him, and then K2SO saves the day and comes in and beats the crap out of everybody and throwing them around and killing them and stuff.
Really
and
fun.
Just it was a fun sequence, because just having Alan Tudyk voice K2SO, even if it's something serious, it just sounds funny with him.
It does, and it's so funny because you get that deadpan humor from the robot, like, good thing I didn't stay in the truck kind of thing. Like, just kind of cutting through some of the seriousness of what happens. But now you're, with those guys taken out and they can get back to their ship, now it's a mad race back to Yavin, where, Clea is very much afraid that, with the butting of heads that Luthen and Mon Mothma and everybody else has had, is she going to be accepted on Yavin? Because Yavin was kind of this... They disagreed on the importance of Yavin, you can tell. And, with her being connected to Luthen, she's like, am I going to be accepted here? Are they going to, Am
I going to be a prisoner? Or
like, what's going to happen when we arrive on this planet? And Cassian's like, you got to trust me. You got to trust me. You got to tell him what you know. Because Clea's the one that has all the information about the Death Star here. Like, she's the one that can give this important information to the rebellion to kind of... hey, this is the very real existential threat that we're up against here that they've been working on. And, everybody that's in this position of power still doesn't believe that it's an actual real thing. And you get some of that diplomatic BS that you have to deal with the rebellion sometimes that kind of helps them get in their own way. But you get her back, you get her faculties together, and there's a really interesting conversation that happens there where they kind of try to downplay Luthen's importance here, like, we're all part of the rebellion. But even you get a really powerful speech from Cassian at that point where he really goes to bat for Luthen here. Like, are you really going to disrespect and dishonor everything that this man has done for the rebellion? Like, there would be no rebellion if it wasn't for him. It was probably one of his better moments in this entire series was this speech that he gives here at the end, because it's really powerful stuff where he's going to bat for a person that, even though he didn't see eye to eye with at all times, understood how important he was at the end to this cause. And, it's like, you're not going to disrespect everything that he sacrificed here by just blatantly ignoring this last bit of information he's trying to get to you, because it's a very real thing.
Yeah, because Cassian just lays it out like, I know more than anybody the bad stuff and the good stuff and the hardships and everything else, and looking straight at Mon Mothma, who kind of knows the same. Like, we can't ignore this. Like, he may have been a lot of things, but this isn't a lie when it comes to the information and everything else, because they didn't want to believe him. They didn't want to believe that they have a weapon going out. And I was laughing a second ago to look at my notes again with K2SO. Like, when they're coming back to Yavin, they're kind of swarmed by X-Wings because they're being taken as prisoners, and they're trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do. And K2SO's, I plan to tell them I was kidnapped, and puts his hands up and everything else. Like, it's that great levity that you need in such a dark and serious series and everything else. But we get Saul and Mon Mothma talking. We kind of get to see exactly setting up where Saul is, that he has kind of gone off the loose end. He's basically formed his own rebellion outside of the rebellion. He's operating outside of anybody's laws or rules or anything else, that I'm going to do whatever I feel like I need to do to stop the Empire. And he's uncontrollable, and it just sets up perfectly exactly where he is in Rogue One. But it was a lot of fun in this episode, but I say fun because there's a lot of darkness and heartfelt stuff that we get to see exactly where everybody is. Again, it was fun to see Mon Mothma being Mon Mothma, the rebel leader. Like, when we last left her, she was scared and frightened, and she's, was going to be brought by the rebel group to, come to Yavin and stuff. And we hadn't really seen her since then. I mean, now we get to see the new Mon Mothma and stuff, and we get some not flashbacks, but we get some flash arounds to different things towards the end of the episode here as kind of Cassian is going. So I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but we get to see what happens to a lot of characters here. But, Cassian finally gets them to kind of believe what's been said and what's going on, and that something needs to be done about it. But we also get the setup for Rogue One that there's this mole inside of Saul's group that's from the rebellion. He's trying to reach out to the rebellion. He's called 6-7 different times, but he will only talk to Cassian. Of course, this is the guy that we kind of kick Rogue One off with, that Cassian meets in the alley and everything else. So we kind of get that connection of, okay, now we know where Cassian's going to go. Because finally, once they get the, Mon Mothma and everybody on board, it's time for Cassian to head out. It's time for him to go meet this mole to see exactly what's going on, because they know the information now, and this guy seems to know some information about the Death Star and everything else too, so they've got to kind of figure out exactly what they need to do with this mole and get the information out of him.
Good old Galen Erso himself, which they do such a good job of landing the plane here and like literally setting up everything that you can seamlessly jump into Rogue One from here with everything. So you understand that Saw Gerrera is on the planet of Jedha, which is very important in Rogue One. Obviously, that's where you find Saw Gerrera there. You have, everybody kind of scattering off to, go to the places they need to go for this. And you kind of hope here at the end to have some resolution on some loose threads that are kind of left dangling. Obviously, if you've been following this show from the beginning, you want to know what happens to Bix. Unfortunately, you know that we don't see Bix in Rogue One. So you're like, what kind of fate does Bix have? And I'm going to jump to the very, very end. And this very last scene, which was so incredible, and I love that it ended on such a positive note.
The very last scene of the series.
Yeah, the very last scene of the episode, the last scene in the entire series. You get a really cool cutaway to this remote planet that's just, you could just tell is just way off in its own little
It's the one that
space.
they were on, when the rebellions were on, when Cassian rescued Bix and Wilmon before.
Correct. So she goes back to that planet, and, you get this close-up of Bix, and Bix is with child, and it's Cassian's kid, and you get that comfort of knowing that they're safe and they're kind of out of the way and they're out of harm's way, and it's just such a really positive thing. And one thing that is just kind of just a really quick point on that planet too. You get Charlie the droid, who, this entire time you wanted him. It's kind of a bit of a somber kind of send-off for him, because all he's wanted this entire time is to be reunited with Cassian, and now unfortunately we know with the events that play with Rogue One that you don't know if they ever got to reunite or they got to do that, and you just kind of wonder what the resolution for him was. But ending it on this positive note that all he wanted was, Bix to be safe and them to have this simple, quiet life together, and to know that she's on this planet and safe with Cassian's kid was just really such a heartwarming, powerful end to this series. It's like, okay, there's at least some potential good that's going to come out of this, because we know what happens with Rogue One, obviously, but such a really powerful, ending scene to this series. And it's just like, all right, in all this darkness, there's still a little bit of hope ahead for the future.
You get Bix just giving the slightest of smiles while she's holding, we assume, a son and the baby there, and you get the slightest of smile, and that's it. And it's like, wow. Yeah. I do want to jump back just for a moment, because we do get a few things wrapped up with the Empire. So we get Partagaz, who is the kind of the main Empire lieutenant or admiral, or I forget exactly what his designation was and stuff, but he was the one who kind of led up everything on Gorman and was working with Dedra and everything. And it gets to a scene where he's listening to the audio of all these rebellions and everything else that have been happening, and you get someone else that comes in and said he's expected for a meeting, that he needs to go, and he asks, I just need a moment to collect my thoughts. And he sits down in an empty room, and you see the other lieutenant, or whatever his designation was, go out with the stormtroopers, and he waits with his back to the door, because he kind of knows what collecting my thoughts is going to be. And we see Partagas pull out a blaster pistol and put it on the desk, and we cut back out into the hallway, and we hear the shot, and we see him hold up his hand to tell the troopers no. Like, it was such a powerful scene because like he knew what was going to happen. He knew Partagas's kind of time was up and that what he was going to do, and he stopped the troopers from going in because like, yeah, we know what happened there. And we also get to look at Dedra, who's now in the prison of that Cassian was in. That basically we get to see her. And that's kind of the last of we see of Dedra. Like, we don't really get any other things about her. She's now a prisoner of the Empire. She's in the jump chute. She's in that cell that we saw so much in the first season and stuff. So we got the resolution that she gave everything to the Empire, and, well, this is what it cost you. What did it cost you? Everything.
Yeah, it was a really powerful way to end this. But like I said, they did such a good job of landing the plane here that lined up everything perfectly in a sense that, you know, you could seamlessly jump into Rogue One. And that's kind of what you and I decided to do. We were like conscious of the fact that we at bare minimum wanted to watch episode 12 and Rogue One kind of back to back, and that's what we decided to do. And I gotta say, man, like going back and watching it now, having known all of what happened with Andor and moved it up, kind of gave me a new appreciation for the film and everything that it did, and it ties together so well because you jump right into Rogue One, and this film came out in 2016, so this film's almost 10 years old at this point, and, you know, it's been out for quite a while, and it is a very seamless transition into the film. Like, you can go right in to watching Rogue One after watching the end of Andor, and it just makes perfect sense from a storyline perspective. Like, you jump right in, and you get, you know, them going to find Gale and Erso, and, you know, just the jumping off of that and all the events that happened in Rogue One. And it was a pretty cool transition to make, and I'm glad we decided to watch it that way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you got from kind of jumping straight in afterwards is you get that appreciation of what the rebellion has gone through to this point of what they've sacrificed, what Cassian has been through, what he's fighting for, and what he's doing. Because there's always a question when you watch Rogue One, like, why did he kill the informant, like the mole, so quickly? And then you get that there was orders, but there was also like they're trying to keep that information about the Death Star kept really tight, and he was potentially going to be taken because he couldn't climb, he couldn't get out. They were cornered, and Cassian knew that unfortunately his life had to be taken because they couldn't risk the Empire knowing what they knew about the Death Star and before they could get the plans and stuff. And man, I'm going to go ahead and jump to it because it's what weighs on my mind is that ending with Bix and seeing her with the baby and smiling on the planet. And then you go to the final scene of Rogue One with Cassian. We've got him and Jen on the beach. They've just sent the message out. The plans are to the rebellion. You've got Leia taken off and everything else, and you get Jen and Cassian hugging, and you get his eyes opening when the blast happens, but just his death. Watching his death scene now after you know that Bix is alive and that he has a child, and it just hits that emotional weight of you just... He's been fighting, as he said in the film, since he was 6 years old. He's known nothing but fighting, and all he desperately wanted was a quiet life with Bix. He wanted to leave it all behind, leave with Bix and go, but Bix has made that decision that, hey, you are going to play a big importance to this rebellion. I cannot stand in the middle of it, and she leaves. But her leaving to make him be part of that ended with his death. Though he has the woman he loves and the child, like it just had such a bigger emotional impact when you see what he had kind of given up, and that she was the reason in the end that he died because he continued on with it. But there's also that hope that Bix is continuing on with her child, and she's going to be able to live and survive, and their family is going to be able to go on because of his sacrifice. Like, it just added such an incredible weight to it. And I did see somebody who said they worked on the film, worked on Andor. So at some point in the series, Cassian loses his blaster and he ends up taking Bix's blaster. That's the same blaster used in Rogue One that he would use in Andor. So what he fought to the end and shooting Krennic and everything else was Bix's weapon. So it just added such another layer of everything to it. Like, oh man, like there's such a love and a connection to Bix, and she's the reason why the rebellion survived and went on because she let Cassian go, but he's also got a wife and a kid out there from her. Like it's such a poetic ending to it all, and just adds that emotional depth to his death scene in Rogue One.
Yeah, it just breaks your heart all over again, man. It really does, because it's such a gut punch in that movie. Like, it's so rare to have these types of films where, like, you don't win. Like, the good guys don't win in this movie, and it is such a devastating, heartbreaking thing, because you got so connected to these characters, and then in one fell swoop, they're gone like that. And you see the greater importance, and you see where it kicks in. And that's where I love a good interconnected story. And, you get the awesome end of, Rogue One with Vader going on the rampage to try to get those plans from going out. And they wind up breaking away just in the nick of time to deliver the message to the rebellion. And, the cool superimposed version of Carrie Fisher in that one. It is just a really cool ending to that film. But yeah, man, it just adds that extra heft and weight to that story, that you see Cassian and how he's fully integrated with the rebellion by that point. He's upgraded to the role of captain again, and it's just such a cool transition into that film, that they did such a good job of bridging that gap in this show. And we were kind of wondering, like, how are they going to bridge this gap from where we find Cassian at the beginning of Andor to the end where it meets up with Rogue One. And they just did such a beautiful job of telling that story of kind of the early uprising of the rebellion to where they get in Rogue One, which is the real kickoff to the rebellion finally getting the upper hand on the Empire and ultimately defeating them. Obviously, spoiler if you've never watched Star Wars before, but
Come on,
like it's been 40 years. Like come on, man. But, it's just a cool way to connect all of those stories, and it's just such a beautiful way that they did it, and it added such an extra, like you said, an extra stakes to an already gut-punching and heavy movie, and it just made it that much better, in my opinion, that if you do plan on watching Andor and getting to the end, I cannot recommend enough going right in and starting Rogue One at the same time, because it lets you see that film a little differently, and I wonder if it's going to bring more people around to Rogue One, because Rogue One, for a lot of reasons, is a very polarizing Star Wars movie, because it doesn't have the traditional beginning scroll of the story like all the other Star Wars movies has. It kind of cuts some of those tropes that Star Wars had, and it's kind of its own thing.
And as you mentioned, it's where the heroes lose, but also win, but mostly lose.
Yeah, it's a heavy loss movie, and it's not that feel good, hope for the rebellion kind of thing that you're doing until the very, very, very end where the story's going. But it's such a cool bridge in between those that I think I got more appreciation for the movie.
That is, well, yeah.
Having to go in, and I already liked the movie to begin with, but watching how Andor played out and how it connects here, and then going back and watching that movie again, it added an extra gut punch to the end when they did. I mean, you're just like, I knew it was coming, and it was still heavy, and I was still, coming off of the emotions of how Andor ended to how Rogue One played out. It was so good, man. So well done. Hats off to the writers on Andor for telling an amazing story over the course of 2 seasons to kind of get us to Rogue One and just kind of fill in that time gap of the early stages of the rebellion to where it really kicks off for those next sets of movies. But absolutely fantastic job.
Easily the best dialogue and writing and everything they've had in Star Wars. Like, as much as we love the original trilogy and stuff, George Lucas was never the best at writing dialogue. Sure. He did had some problems and issues. There's some iconic lines and stuff that happened, but between the prequels and the original trilogy, there's some bad dialogue, and Andor's dialogue carried such weight and such heart and such just everything. Like, this is some of the best, if not the best, Star Wars that we've had since the original trilogy. Like, it's done so incredibly well. It's something that you do, but you don't have to be fully invested in Star Wars to enjoy, because you can watch it for the emotional impact and the heart, and there's plenty of political commentary and everything else, depending on, there's a lot of innuendo of what the political commentary means. So depending on the sides that you are on, that you might not like it because of that, but if you actually give it a chance and look at it, like Andor was such an incredible series. Like, season 2 was incredible. I still say 7, 8, and 9 were the most incredible episodes they gave, but 10, 11, and 12 did give us such a a fitting into these characters, leading us into Rogue One. And a lot of people agreed with us that watching Rogue One right after episode 12 was a thing to do because it was the #1 movie on Disney Plus this weekend. Yeah. So everybody went back and revisited, and it was well worth it. So I think it's at the point now that we can give our rating for season 2. And if we wanted to do a revisit, like, of course, Rogue One came out long before we did this podcast, so we could go back and revisit our feelings on that and give it a rating. But for Andor season 2, it started off slow. We can get that it had a lot to build up to. Those first 6 episodes, while good, were very slow, but 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, and 12 really just solidified just how amazing this series is. I'm going to give it a 9. Season 2 is a 9. It was just fantastic. Like, Genevieve O'Reilly was so good as Mon Mothma. Diego coming back as Cassian, and what he did there was fantastic. Clea, Elizabeth's first acting job ever, she was fantastic. Skelly Skarsgård, as always, was just utterly brilliant as Luthen. But this was a fantastic series that led into Rogue One perfectly, that added so much more depth and heart to Rogue One. It's a 9 out of 10 series for me.
Absolutely. I would put it on as a 9 out of 10 as well. It's, in my opinion, the smartest writing that anybody associated with Star Wars has done up to this point, and I'm willing to stand on business on that. Like, it is such a brilliantly written show. The dialogue, the emotional depth, the heaviness, has a little bit of levity with some humor in it when it's needed. But for the most part, it's a very heavy stakes emotional story that's just written so incredibly well. The pacing of it, while a little problematic at the beginning of season 2, I don't agree that it took 6 episodes to really get there for me, but I would agree with the first 3, especially being more of the building and then really pushing forward beyond that. But it's really a fantastically written story, just an incredible show, well worth your time. You don't have to really be a Star Wars fan to appreciate this, because it's not your typical religious overtones of using the Force, and there's not a ton of Force and lightsabers and all that. It's a very spy heavy rebellion against the uprising of an evil empire kind of story that, it's so well done. There's a lot of heavy stakes. It's paid off very well. Go back and watch Rogue One as well when you're done. I cannot recommend doing that enough. It's just the perfect way to cap off such an incredible show that I can't wait to dive back in and watch the entire thing from start to end now, because I didn't really dive back into season 1 before season 2 started like I wanted to, but I'd love to go back and watch the whole thing over again at some point.
It's not very easy bingeable because of how long it is, but I would love to go back and watch all of it.
I love it for that reason, though, because it's not a 35, 40-minute episodes. Most of these episodes are like an hour long, or pushing an hour, or 45 minutes to an hour, where some of these other series, like I love Mandalorian and Grogu, but like Mandalorian a lot of times had like 30-minute episodes, and they felt very short and very stunted for the stories they could tell. But this does a good job of taking its time and telling the stories, and getting you invested in these characters. It's just so well written, such a smart show that some of my favorite TV I've seen in a hot minute. Like you said, episodes 7, 8, and 9 is one of the best 3-episode story arcs I think I've ever seen in any Star Wars
or not.
Like, it's fantastically well done and worth the time alone just to get invested for that. But it's such a well-told story, and just really helped tie into a movie that I'm hoping a lot more people that were not as into Rogue One kind of come around to having watched Andor and how it ties into that, and the full story of why we should care about those characters when they... Because that was a lot of the criticism I saw of the story. Like, why are we supposed to be so invested in these characters that ultimately don't, quote-unquote, mean a lot to the overall story that we were given at that time? Well, now you can go back and watch Andor and care about these people. Like, it's worth the investment now, and just hats off to the people that made the show. It was fantastic. It was brilliant, and a show that I absolutely loved.
And the time jumps worked, and I think the time jumps actually helped with the time of Rogue One, because we know Rogue One happens days before A New Hope, and it ends the same day of New Hope. Like, when Leia leaves on the ship, A New Hope picks up moments later. Right. So, like, it moves directly, as Andor moves directly into Rogue One, you get more solidification that's moving directly right into A New Hope. So you almost, I kind of want to do Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, Rogue One, and A New Hope all together. So, A New Hope originally was the Star Wars film. It wasn't planned or was initially thinking it was going to end up being this 40, 50-year run of ever was, that it was just Star Wars. It wasn't A New Hope yet. So I think seeing Rogue One and going right into A New Hope might have a new impact as well. But I wanted to stop at Rogue One for this, but I think I want to go back and watch Andor Season 1 and 2, Rogue One, and A New Hope, and just see how it all kind of moves together, because I think they moved into A New Hope really well. Sure. But you get that darkness and that heartfelt emotion and everything from Andor and Rogue One into A New Hope, and see the stakes and everything, and see if even Andor had an effect on how you feel about A New Hope is what I'm kind of curious about now. Like, we all know and love the original trilogy, and we know those films like the back of our hand, but I'm really curious to see how I feel, if it changed my feeling on A New Hope at all. Like, I don't know if it will fully, but I think that emotional impact might carry a little bit more into if I watch it in a binge setting.
Yeah, it's definitely one worth potentially doing. Like, if you can find the entire timeline of all these stories and just kind of watch them in order and see how well everything flows, it'd be interesting to see like how that all plays out for sure. But all of the episodes of Andor Season 2 are available now on Disney+. Please go check that show out. Come to our YouTube page, come to our Discord, let us know what you think of the show. If you have the same feelings about it as us, we'd love to talk about this show with you. Just such an incredible journey going on it feels like we've been watching this show forever now, but it's only been 4 weeks, and they did such a good job of pacing this show that it's one that I'm still super excited to talk about. So come to our Discord, come talk to us, let us know what you think. If you watch Rogue One following into it, let us know if you have a new appreciation for that film too, because we found that we liked it even more than we initially did.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you were going to give Rogue One a rating now after watching Andor, like, what do you think your rating of Rogue One would have been before Andor? And do you feel like you gave it extra points after watching Andor?
I think when I initially watched it, I probably would have given it like a 6.5, 7 out of 10, just out of my initial watch. Like, I enjoyed the movie, but I was still kind of the, okay, why do I need to care about these characters just because they, fought valiantly to get these plans of the Death Star to, like, it felt like it was a cool movie and it was done well and like it had a really cool emotional ending to it, but I didn't know how I felt about it. Now, after going back and getting the Andor story, I'm going to bump Rogue One up to like a 7.5 to an 8. Like, I think it adds that much more emotional heft to the story, knowing what we know now about how everything plays out. But it definitely bumped it up a full point for me, for sure.
Yeah, I bumped it up a full point, but I think I started with Rogue One at like a 7.5 for me initially, and I would put Rogue One after Andor up to a solid 8.5. Like, it gave you just that much more emotion and reason why should you care about these characters, Andor gives you the reason why you should care.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd give Rogue One now a solid 8.5. Like, it is definitely the best of the modern Star Wars films, but that emotional impact really helps from Andor of, well, this is why Cassian is this way. This is why he was ready to take out Jin's dad. This is why he was willing to take out the Mole and Saw's group. This is why he was willing to do everything because of Bix and because of everything he's been fighting for in Luthen and Mon Mothma and everything that's been going on. This is why Cassian, this is why the Rebels, this is why everyone was willing to do what they were willing to do, and it gave such a bigger emotional impact. So yeah, it's worth a full point upgrade for me to bring it to like an 8.5 now.
I love that. It's beautiful, and it's so well done. And like we said, go check out Andor Season 2. Lead it right into Rogue One. Watch it at the end if you get a chance. If you're going to watch the last 3 episodes, if you're going to watch it in the batches in which it came out, watch 10 and 11 together, and then watch 12 and Rogue One. Absolutely. If you want to break out and pace it that way. Perfectly ties in everything together. It's so well done, and I'm thankful that we went and watched it as we did and went along with it and decided to do Rogue One as well. Fantastic way to end that show.
Yeah, so moving on to what's coming up this week, we have kind of our first big start to the summer blockbuster season, I would say. We have Disney's Lilo and Stitch live action adaptation, which, of course, Disney's live action adaptations haven't been the greatest. They've been okay. But Lilo and Stitch is one that for me and my family were really excited for because it's a character in a movie that we really love. Like our car is called Stitch. We have Stitch everywhere within it. It's a blue car, has everything stitched out on it. We're really looking forward to this as a family. I'm looking forward to it as even if I didn't have my kids to bring into it, I'm looking forward to seeing. You've got the original voice actor for Stitch in there, so you've kind of still got that same heart. Like if they would have went someone else, I don't think it already without seeing the movie, I don't think it would have as much impact as having the original voice of Stitch back because it's such a unique, funny character that it's got to have that person who brought that soul and brought that character to life in live action here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with it, and hopefully it's a solid adaptation of the animated movie.
Yeah, for sure. Lilo and Stitch is one of the more iconic modern Disney films. Like it's got such a huge following that going into this heavy Memorial Day weekend that we've got coming up this week, it's notoriously a big kickoff for summer blockbuster season as well. But we have two huge movies coming out this week at the same time. And it's going to be interesting to see the different dynamics in audience. Obviously, the next one that you're going to talk about is skewing towards an older audience for sure. But this one, it's a huge family popular film. It's going to do gangbusters at the box office. It's going to make a ton of money. Lilo and Stitch is a really, really fantastic animated film that I'm excited to see the live action take on because it's gonna get a lot of eyeballs, and I hope it does the animated feature justice. There's a lot of people that are indifferent on the Disney live action stuff, and this may be one of the last live action adaptations that Disney does for a while, especially with everything that happened with, the Snow White film and all the controversy around it. Like this may be one of the last chances they get to get it right, but I'm hoping the story is done well enough that people walk away really loving this film, and one that I'm excited to check out too.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, we also have Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This is the 8th and potential final film. Like originally this was Dead Reckoning Part 2.
Correct.
But sometime after the first part came out, they changed that to be Dead Reckoning, and now this one's going to be the Final Reckoning. They kind of split it. Instead of being a part 1 and part 2, they're two separate. I mean, the movie's almost 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see. This series started in 1996. Of course, it was based off of the 60s, 70s Mission Impossible show that kind of started it all. It's going to be really interesting to see if this is the final one. Tom Cruise is getting older. He's still doing incredible stunts and everything else, so we don't know if maybe they'll reboot Mission Impossible. I don't know if Tom Cruise would allow, while he's around, Mission Impossible be done without him, but it's going to be really interesting to see if this is the final one, how it ends it for the series, because it has been one of the most consistent since, I think, Mission Impossible 3, Mission Impossible 3 to 4, when it really kicked off what we know of Mission Impossible now. It's been such a consistently good, solid action summer blockbuster since then. Like it's been a really solid series. I mean, of course, everyone has mixed feelings on John Woo's Mission Impossible 2, and the first one has been back and forth. This was the first time I've revisited Mission Impossible in a long time, the very first one. It definitely has a different feel than all the others, and it was really 3 and 4 that really kicked off the Mission Impossible that we know now. But it's since 1996 till now, we have the 8th and potential final one. I'm really looking forward to checking this one out in theaters.
It's one of those almost guaranteed bankable type of action franchises. Like every single one of these is put out have done really well commercially at the box office. This is one that I anticipate also doing incredibly well. Having the extended holiday weekend is going to benefit both movies, I think. I think both movies are going to do really well. Like I said, a little bit of dynamically different audiences, obviously, where the more older, mature crowd is going to be more involved with seeing Mission Impossible, but you have the families too. I know we're going to check out both films and we're going to talk about them in our next episode, but this is another one that I'm very excited with. I love Dead Reckoning. I thought Dead Reckoning was one of the better Mission Impossible movies of these last few that we've gotten. Like I'd put it up there with Ghost Protocol as one of my personal favorites. Fallout was really good too. Like it's just consistently good movies. Like they do over the top action, spy, thriller. One thing I can say, just kind of tongue in cheek, I'm so glad this movie's finally coming out, because it feels like for the last year we've seen this trailer for almost every single movie we've gone to see, just goes to show how much we go to see it. But just for my sanity, I'm gonna be glad that this movie's finally coming out so we can can get some different previews in the movies.
One last time.
But yeah, one last time. But it just feels like we've been seeing the preview for this for so long, and it's finally here, and I'm excited to check it out.
Yeah, on demand this week, we have The Legend of Ochi, the family fantasy adventure film, coming out on May 20th. So that's one I was looking forward to see. I didn't go to theaters to see it with my family and stuff. There's kind of mixed reviews on it. But I'm really looking forward to checking out. Probably will be waiting to hit streaming before I check it out to see exactly what I thought. But it did use a lot of practical effects and stuff in it too. But it's just one that was, I think the timing of when it came out just did not work for it.
Yeah, it's one that I've been waiting to check out too, and we'll definitely check it out on streaming once it hits, but it looks like it's close to getting there now.
Here on the streaming side, we have Fear Street Prom Queen on Netflix. That'll be dropping on May 23rd. So this is a fourth film based on the R.L. Stine book series. So, of course, he also did Goosebumps that we grew up with as kids reading. I remember I would get those books. And, I mean, they were thin little horror books for kids, but I would sit there and I would read through one after another. Like, I remember having a chair in the middle of the living room where I sat, and I think I read two of the books back to back in like one sitting.
Yeah, they were the popular books at the book fair when we had them as kids. Everybody wanted to go get the latest Goosebumps book when they came out. So definitely one that, hits you right in the feels of, childhood for us. But excited to check that one out because I've checked the other ones out. They've been pretty solid, decent films. So I definitely wanted to check out at some point for sure.
Yeah, the Fear Street ones are the ones I never read, and I never checked out the film. So I may go back and revisit afterwards here. But we also have one again. Apple TV Plus, we love you. You have incredible films and TV shows. Take another drink, Josh. But we have The Fountain of Youth coming out on Apple TV Plus. This is a John Krasinski, Natalie Portman action-adventure film dropping on May 23rd as well. But I've seen one trailer that just kind of came out not too long ago. Like, there's been no hype build. There's been no marketing build. You've got two major stars in John Krasinski and Natalie Portman in this, in an action-adventure Indiana Jones meets Uncharted type of film, but there's been just no marketing for it.
Apple marketing. Do a shot. We talk about it all the time. Like, come on, man. Like, this is just, I can't. I don't have the fight in me anymore to tell Apple to promote their stuff better. But you got big stars in your shows and your other properties. Like, you just hope for word of mouth to push your product for you. In some ways it works, in some ways it doesn't. But this is one I want to see. It looks cool. I'm excited to check it out. I'll check it out this weekend at some point when it drops on Apple. But man, just you get stuff like this and you don't tell anybody about it. Like, I don't know if we're just not in the right algorithm to get these things, but
we're watching everything and we're just not seeing anything.
Yeah, it feels like these are like the best kept secrets in Hollywood sometimes, and it's just like
it's really only if you're watching Apple TV Plus stuff do you see anything on Apple TV Plus. Past that, you don't hear about it.
Yeah. Like, there's an incredible catalog of stuff there, and it should get more viewership and eyeballs than it does, but that's an Apple problem, not an us problem.
Over on the TV side, we have Pee Wee S himself. So this is a 2-part docuseries on the late Paul Reubens and his most infamous character in Pee Wee Herman. This is going to be a really interesting documentary to check out because he's not without his controversies. Of course, he had his arrest and problems and issues, but Pee Wee's Playhouse was a huge kid series. And you also got Pee Wee's Big Adventure and the movies and stuff they did based off of Large Marge and everything else that's iconic and memorable, and that bicycle and all that. Like, it was something that exploded. It was one of the first things you ever saw Lawrence Fishburne in, which you forget that he was in Pee Wee's Playhouse and part of that stuff too. And it's going to be really interesting to see exactly how much they dive into it. Of course, he was another one that we lost to an illness that no one really knew that he was battling. He was in Batman Returns. He is even showed back up in Gotham as well when they did that and stuff. But he's always been kind of a polarizing person and character, and it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what this docuseries goes on about. If it's mainly about Pee Wee, if they're going to dive into more of the serious, darker stuff.
I can't imagine they can't avoid it, you know what I mean? So we'll see the duality of the man versus the role he played and see how far they dive into his personal business. But yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, that'll be out on HBO on May 23rd. We also have The Librarians, the next chapter. So this was something my wife introduced me to. So there was it was Noah Wiley did this Librarian series of like films and TV shows and stuff that aired on TNT and others that aired for a while. And they're fun kind of, I would put them like National Treasure type of just action adventure series and stuff. So they're kind of rebooting it with a sequel series here that'll be on TNT on May 25th. I'm looking forward to checking it out because, like I said, my wife got me into the older Librarian stuff, and we watched till the series that was running ended and stuff. I'm curious to see. They were not always the greatest, but they were fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some positive things about it. It's never one that's really landed on my radar, but you got another series, coming out of this. If you're fans of that, please check it out and let us know what you think. If it's worth the time, we might add it to our rotation as well. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. We've got a huge dual blockbuster week coming up. This coming week, we are going to be reviewing the live-action Lilo and Stitch film as well as Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Excited to go see those two movies and come and talk about it here on the podcast. But until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.